Hey guys, Dr. Bodle here. Now, Hashimoto's and autoimmunity have the capacity to make people feel very much alone. It's hard for others to see what's going on, and therefore it's difficult for them to understand the true challenges and symptoms that you're dealing with. Plus, you might not know a lot of people or have anyone close to you who also has autoimmunity. If you don't have the ability to share or confide in someone, then it doesn't do us a lot of good. At the same time, it might seem to you as though there is an uptick in the discussion around Hashimoto's. More resources are available, whether that's online or in book form, and you might see people sharing their experiences through social media, whether that's your regular average person or even sometimes celebrities. So, is the prevalence of Hashimoto's and autoimmunity actually increasing? And if so, where is this coming from? And what does it mean for us as an individual? Well, to start off, it's important that we note that tracking autoimmunity can be a tough thing to do. Autoimmune disease can be defined by autoimmunity plus clinically apparent pathology. That means that we have both the presence of antibodies for our own tissues or glands, and those antibodies are leading to some sort of damage within our system. This is typically measured by some sort of testing or the presence of overt symptomatology. I, for one, really like this definition because I think it shows us something that's really important. Oftentimes, doctors will only wait until very late stages of autoimmunity before they start making recommendations. However, this shows us that if we have antibodies on our blood labs and the presence of symptoms, that can be enough to justify an autoimmune condition. And the reason why I think that's so important is because it really comes back to you as an individual. If you're suffering and not feeling like yourself, then we need to take action. And if we're just waiting around for our lab tests to get worse, you're going to be the one who suffers most as that waiting period goes on. The problem is, not only does that lack of understanding when it comes to defining autoimmune diseases affect your doctor's decision making and therefore you as a patient, but it also impacts our ability to track the amount of people who have autoimmune disease. So that last little bit of the definition, clinically apparent pathology, can vary from doctor to doctor and also sometimes country to country. And the reason why I think this part of the definition is left a little vague is because even though we know more about autoimmunity than we ever have before, the precise mechanism for why autoimmunity occurs still is unclear. Now, there is a growing consensus in the research that autoimmunity has evolved from a still to be defined gene environment interaction. And this makes sense, right? We've talked before about how part of the development of autoimmunity is genetics. Having certain groupings of gene patterns and having people in your family with autoimmunity can make it more likely for you to develop autoimmunity as well. But just because you have certain genes doesn't mean that you're 100% guaranteed to develop something like Hashimoto's. So this is where that environmental piece comes into play. Exposure to certain environmental factors does have the capacity to trigger the development of autoimmunity. So when we're looking at the overall prevalence of the disease, it's important that we consider both the genetic and the environmental factors. Now, when these things are accounted for, and the research considers that we have a better capacity to test for and assess autoimmunity in general, it's clear, based on a number of factors, that the prevalence of autoimmunity and autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's are increasing. And in fact, some research papers go as far to say that the change is dramatic in nature. But is it our genes? Or is it the environment? Well, as we just said, we know that our genes play a role in autoimmunity, but due to the speed of change or the rapidness of the increase of autoimmune conditions, it's very unlikely that genetics are the main driving factor in this increase. But even though that's a point that's fairly easy for us to understand, still, most of the research goes into the genetic aspect of these conditions. And why is that? Well, it's simply because genes are a little bit easier for us to study. Now, I'm not saying that the science is easy, but if we compare that to looking at and assessing environmental factors, it can be extremely difficult to assess someone's environmental dosage, duration of exposure, and the effect that it has on their body over the entirety of their life. And that's why this side of autoimmune conditions tends to get less attention. But even though it gets less attention, there is evidence in the research that this is really the part we should be paying attention to. And I agree. And the reason why I think that is because although it's good to have an education and understanding of our health conditions, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you're feeling better and you're making improvements. And although our gene expression can be influenced, that can be something that's very difficult for us to change. Instead, looking at what the research points out could be potential environmental triggers, that can give us an idea of what might have initiated our autoimmunity in the first place, and potentially could be preventing our capacity to heal in an ongoing fashion. So what environmental factors does the current evidence show could be involved in Hashimoto's and autoimmunity? Well, starting at the top, but likely in no particular order. Number one, alterations in our food supply. Number two, xenobiotics, or chemicals that are foreign to our body. That includes things like pharmaceuticals, plastics, breakdown products from the burning of gas, oil, and coal, pesticides, and more. Number three, air pollution. Number four, infections. Number five, personal lifestyle, which could include things like lack of sleep or obesity. Number six, stress. And number seven, climate change. And real quick, because someone might ask, and I was curious about it too, but the reason why climate change is included is because of the interactions that it has with some of the things that are previously on the list. So it could potentially lead to the increased likelihood of different types of infections or worsening of certain environmental pollutants. That's something that we don't have a lot of control over as an individual, so we're not going to pay a ton of attention to it right now. Just want to clear that up. But aside from climate change, as I read through that list, you might have said, you know what? A lot of these things sound familiar to me. And the reason why is because a lot of this stuff we've talked about in other videos. When I try to formulate care plans or new strategies for my patients, yes, a large amount of that comes from clinical evidence and understanding how our physiology works, but I also like to base a lot of it off of what we're seeing in the research. It might not give us the whole thing, but it can be a great starting point. So when I started getting into helping people to manage their autoimmunity, I wanted to look at what the research said about things that contribute to it. And after going through some of these different review papers, I tried to identify what were things that we have control over and what were things that we can only manage. This is why when I try to teach you about these things, so much of the focus is on how do we optimize our nutrition for Hashimoto's? How can we improve our lifestyle choices? How can we manage our stress? And although we can't really change things like the air pollution or different compounds in our water, maybe we use something like a filter to help us mitigate those challenges. Or we could provide certain supplemental and nutraceutical compounds to help make sure that our body is processing and clearing those things from our system. As I like to point out, there isn't one answer for these things, which can make it challenging to know exactly what we should be doing. But by having a list like this, it allows us to be more aware of those potential contributing factors. And if we know that they're out there and that they are having a real impact on the way that our immune system and thyroid are working, then it can make it a bit easier for us to take action and develop a strategy. Now, obviously this video is less about action and it's more about understanding. But I think it's just as valuable because the next time your doctor says, there's nothing that we can do for you, these are the things that they need to be aware of, and unfortunately, sometimes it's our job to bring that to their attention. But you also need to know that this stuff isn't coming out of thin air. It's in the research. It's clear that these things have an impact on autoimmunity, and this load that these different types of stressors within our environment places on our body can be managed if we start to make some different choices around those things that are under our control. So if we know that symptoms increase with certain types of nutritional choices, then it's very possible that we can also decrease some of the severity of our symptoms with different types of choices. But even if your doctor isn't willing to accept this evidence at this time, hopefully it's something that they'll come around to, and hopefully more and more doctors will be aware of this evidence as we move forward. As I said before, although we can have some problems defining autoimmune disease, whether it's on a global scale or on an individual scale, The issue really is less about how many people have it and more about the fact that it can lead to your symptoms being ignored. Waiting until things get worse is not an option for us. So if we can take what these research papers are telling us, then we can be more proactive with our plan of attack and hopefully help you feel better sooner. But hopefully this answers some questions that you might have had about Hashimoto's and autoimmunity and maybe weren't properly answered by your doctor. Also, hopefully it gives you some better information to have a discussion with your doctor. That way you can be better served and maybe it can help some of the other patients that the doctor's seeing as well. And of course, if you have any questions, thoughts, or feedback, you can leave me a comment down below. If you like this video but want more help and you're interested in working with me, then you can start that process by sending an email to contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com and asking to get more information about my online course, Natural Hashimoto's Transformation. In the course, I'll provide you with information to help you understand your Hashimoto's better than you ever have before, while also providing you with a clear plan of action centered around nutrition choices, supplementation, exercise, sleep, hormonal regulation, and more. That way you can start making real changes and see improvements in your symptoms. The course includes 8 modules and almost 12 hours of instruction. Plus, there's also weekly live question and answer sessions and a supportive Facebook group. That way you can ask anything that comes up and make sure that you're getting help every step of the way. If the course sounds like it might be a good fit for you, make sure to reach out. I always start with a free consultation. That way we can talk about your goals, where you're at with your health, and get you all the information you need before making that decision. If you're not interested in starting the course just yet, there's other materials for you to keep learning as well. You can check out some of the other videos here on my YouTube channel. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook for strategies, information, and tips. And you can also grab either one of my free downloads, which are linked in the description box below. That's it for this one. I hope you liked it. I hope you're doing well. If you did enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, and if you want to make sure you're notified for future videos, click on that notification bell. I really do appreciate it. My name is Dr. Bodle. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.